Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, The Voice of Mothers Uncovering the Truth Behind the Numbers. My name is Ángela Garcia. I'm the projects director at Make Mothers Matter and mother of two boys of 5 and 8 years old. Challenging. Wherever you are joining from today, in my case from Seville, Spain, I'm thrilled to have you with us for this important discussion. Just so you know, this webinar will be conducted in English with live translation available in French. You will have the option, you will find the option in the bottom bar of your Zoom screen. Before we begin, I'd love to start with a quick interactive question for all of you. A question we have asked to the sample of our 2024 survey. Next slide, please. What are the 3 words you associate with parenting? Please type your answers in the chat. We'll take a look at some of your responses in a moment. But while you do that, let me introduce Make Mothers Matter, or MMM, for those who may not be familiar with our work. MMM is an international NGO that advocates for the rights of mothers. We bring the voices and challenges of mothers to decision makers and high-level institutions, the European Union, United Nations, and UNESCO, pushing for policy changes that positively impact the lives of millions of mothers worldwide. And when we talk about challenges, well, I'm sure many of you here know exactly what I'm talking about. Balancing work and family life, the mental load of caregiving, access to proper healthcare and support. We have conducted several surveys over the years because listening to mothers is at the heart of what we do. And our latest one, carried out last year, has led to the State of Motherhood 2024 report. And here's the exciting part. You are the first to access this brand new data today. This extensive study, conducted by Kantar and commissioned by MMM, captures the voices of 9,600 mothers across 12 European countries: Belgium, Czechia, France, Germany, Ireland, Poland, Portugal, Slovakia, Spain, Sweden, and the UK. This is an important survey because there are other surveys about motherhood, but we have asked questions that have never been asked before, and we're going to bring this data to the European Parliament. I'd like to take this moment to thank Özlem and Hanne from Kantar, who I believe are in the audience, for their dedication and support in making this impactful European survey a reality. Before we dive in, let me quickly explain how today's interactive webinar will unfold and what we expect from you, dear audience. Next slide, please. So we'll be talking about 3 topics: work, family dynamics, and mental health. And I'll ask you a total of 6 questions. For each question, I will read it out loud, and then you'll see a pop-up poll on your Zoom screen. You will be able to select what you think is the correct answer and then click submit. We will then reveal the group's responses, followed by the correct answer. And every 2 questions, our panelists will share their insights based on the data. Speaking of panelists, I'm delighted to introduce our fantastic experts who are joining us today and with whom we have had the pleasure of collaborating in the past. We have with us Nikki van der Gaag, an independent gender consultant and writer focusing on gender equality, girls' rights, and masculinities. She is also a senior fellow at Equimundo and involved in the Men and Care campaign and Men Engage. Hello, Nikki. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, bonjour, Angela.
Bonjour. We also have the pleasure of having with us Dr. Alain Grégoire. He's a consultant psychiatrist and a visiting professor at the London School of Economics and Political Science, the LSE, in the UK. And he is the chair of the Global and the UK Maternal Health Alliance. Hello, Alain. Thank you for being with us today.
Hello, Angela, and hello, wonderful audience. Great to be here.
Thank you, Alain. And last but not least, Clémentine Sarlat is with us. She's a former sports journalist and now the host of a very well-known podcast called La Matrescence, dedicated to parenting, birth, education, and psychology. Bienvenue Clémentine, merci d'être là.
Merci. Hi, everyone.
Now, let's turn the question that I asked at the beginning to our panelists. Nikki, what are the 3 words that you associate with parenting?
I think very similar to some of the wonderful ones that this audience is coming up with as well, and they're kind of contradictory. I'm a mum, I'm a daughter, I'm a grandmother as well. So I see all these different generations, and definitely love, care, and juggling would be one for me.
Good one. What about you, Clémentine?
I saw some words that really had an impact on me right here. It was, I think the job we have as parent is important, is exhausting, and is a journey because it also talks to us as a person when we become parents.
I really like that one. It is a journey, a personal journey, right? And what about you, Alain?
Well, I can't speak about motherhood from a personal experience, but of course we have all been babies and all been children as well. Enriching, I think, I would certainly say as a parent and as the experience of being parented. And love, of course, is a very prominent word. And challenging. The most difficult thing any of us ever does is try to support and nurture the next generation. Nobody can do it alone. It's too difficult.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's a journey nobody prepares us to do. Like there is no degree on parenting, right? Well, now I'm going to take a look at what our audience has told us. Famille, amour, responsabilité. What else? Clémentine, je t'adore. That's for you, Clémentine. Education, family, care, joys, tiredness, purpose. Well, it's contradictory, right? Now we're gonna see and compare this with our survey respondents said. Next slide, please. Here are the top words that mothers use to describe their experience. You can see that there are words like love, joy, and happiness that are mixed with tougher ones like fatigue and sacrifice. Well, this shows that motherhood is full of mixed emotions, right? While love is the strongest theme, there's also a lot of struggle behind it, often overlooked in daily life. Well, through the webinar, we encourage you, the audience, to share your thoughts, your experiences, and your comments in the chat. We will review them after the session because your voices are valuable and they give us the insights and strength to continue advocating for change. And if time allows, we will end the webinar with an open question from you to each of our panelists. We'll be choosing them from the Q&A section, so please drop your questions there. Well, and with that, let's dive right in. A quick reminder, I'll read a question, pop-up window. You can select the correct answer, what you think is the correct answer, and then we'll see the audience's responses before I reveal the right one. Okay, so here's your first question on work. Before becoming mothers, 75% of women worked full-time. What percentage of mothers worked full-time after their first child? You see the pop-up window, 3 options and 30 seconds. Do you think it increased to 77%, or that it dropped to 50%, or that it dropped to 60%? Choose what you think is the correct answer. Okay, we're gonna close that window. And we're gonna reveal what the audience has said. So the audience said it dropped to 50%, most of them. Okay, we're gonna close that window and we're gonna reveal what is the correct answer. And it's on the next slide. It's 50%. So you got it right. Good job. Just a small comment here. as you know, we have Europe, the data from the different countries. In France, it's very similar to the mean. So it goes from 70% to 50%. But in the UK, it goes from 75% to 38%. So it's a really big gap. We're going to go to question number 2. Okay, so what percentage of mothers stated that motherhood had a negative impact on their careers? You will see the pop-up window again. You have 4 options. Do you think it's 11% or 20%, 27%, or 51%? Choose your correct answer. Okay, great. Thank you so much for answering. We're going to close this window. I hope everyone had the time to answer. Great. And now we're gonna see what all of you thought about it. Okay. Most of you thought it is 51%. That's very interesting. Knowing that among the public, they're mainly women. So it's 27%, okay, of mothers that stated that motherhood had a negative impact on their careers. Okay, so we have these 2 data, right? Next slide. So 50% of mothers worked full-time after their first child versus 75%. And that in our data, 27% of mothers stated that motherhood had a negative impact on their careers. Negative impact meaning limited career progression or an impact on finances or in pension entitlements. Well, now is the time for our panelists. Clémentine, do you think mothers adapting their careers, it's a choice?
I would say it also depends on the country you live in. Because we all know Northern European countries have better policies around that than we have us in France, for example, but we also have better than in the US. I think the biggest work we have to do is inside companies to make it more adaptable for women to work in, or even for parents in general, in any ways, because we assume women are holding all the labor, but we should include men on that topic. And we all know where the wage gap begins at motherhood. But to me, I had to change work. It was not sustainable to have a baby and a career on TV. If I wanted to be a present mother, it was my choice, but also because it was not adapted to my lifestyle. So I think it starts from the policy in the country that set the tone for women and mothers.
But for example, for you, do you think that if your employer would have let you and gave you this flexibility you needed, you could have continued your work?
I think so, yeah. I think I made a choice out of no choice, actually. It was not made for me. I was working in a 99% male industry in the sports journalism. So obviously no one ever thought about it. Like, what would we do with a woman who has a baby? Just live at home, as us men do. And I was like, no, I can't do that. There's no way I can leave my little baby like this every weekend, go on a plane and on a different country. And it was great because it was sports events, but I needed to be close to my baby for at least 6-7 months. And that was not permitted. I know now they're trying to think about it differently, but it was like 6-7 years ago. So I think we're making progress, but it's too slow.
Yeah, but progress has to come from like individual cases, right? Like a woman that has the courage to stand up and to say to her employer, okay, look, I need this if I want to continue here. Because what it's a little bit sad, and what we see in our survey is that most mothers that experienced this negative impact of motherhood in their works, they do nothing actually. They do nothing, just nothing. They consider leaving the workplace. And very, very few of them actually speak out. So, yeah, Nikki, do fathers also, I mean, you're an expert on that too. Do fathers also adapt their careers after having children? I mean, from your experience, you're muted.
I noticed there was a question about that in the chat as well, and I think it's a really important question. I mean, I think structurally, because men are still, most men are still earning more than women, it doesn't make any sense for men to give up their, to go part-time, or, because it does, financial sense, it doesn't. When we've been doing the surveys for the State of the World's Fathers reports, there's some really interesting statistics coming out about men really wanting to get more involved, but finding that there isn't, first of all, there isn't the financial support, there isn't the structural support, childcare, for example, and also there isn't flexible working, and the kind of social norms, the gender norms around what men should do and women should do, even in Europe, are still very, very entrenched. I was so shocked by some of the statistics in this report. It really showed that how little things have changed. And I think until we think about the unpaid care and domestic work in the home, but which is both a joy and a challenge, and we need to recognize that. Until we think about that in terms of men and women sharing it, and governments and companies putting in the structures that help men to share it as well, nothing's going to change. So it's not just about women's individual choice, although men's individual choice, although that's very important. It's also about the structures and the norms that enable them to make those choices.
Yes, indeed. And what about you, Alain? You as a father, how was your experience? Because we know that the legislations have evolved a lot, but in some places very recently. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, as somebody who's half French, half English, and half Norwegian, maybe that doesn't add up. I also have a kind of cross-European and particularly Scandinavian perspective of this, but also as a father of 3 children, who was the main earner and the main worker during this time, although my wife has a professional career. Many people say, well, when you die, nobody ever dies saying, I didn't spend enough time working. Certainly men will die saying, I didn't spend enough time with my family. And I certainly regret not having had more time with my young children. And I think the experience in Scandinavia is really interesting in that they have for a long time, and most of us know it, had legislation that encourages the participation of fathers with young children. But the reality of what fathers actually do is very little different to the rest of Europe, despite that long-standing both legal framework and, in a way, social framework. There's far more acceptance of fathers being involved, but the reality is that they are very little more involved. My view as a dad and as a man and a worker in this field, working with women with mental health problems, we'll come to that later, is that maybe we should experiment with making laws saying that fathers must take time off. And maybe that will change the structure. It may change careers in that it will force men to take time out and equalize a little bit the career structures. Why do men earn more? Because they don't take time out for childcare,
Exactly.
So the whole thing is a spiral. And maybe push men to do something that will actually improve their quality of life and make them happier and make them die happier.
Yeah, and I think they would also be surprised by the effects of taking that time and doing some care work, because we know, I mean, we women and women and mothers know that it is hard, it is challenging, it is exhausting. It sometimes like I want to kill my children, but what I get from there is such a fulfillment sensation and the connection that I have with my children. And I don't think people and men who don't experience that will have the same connection, because we know mothers, we have this deep connection with our children. And it's not because it's given, it's because we spend a lot of time with them and we really connect with them.
Can I just come in briefly there? I know we need to move on, but one of the really interesting things about some of the research around fatherhood is it shows that the more fathers spend with their children, it actually changes. I mean, and I'm sure you know more about this. It actually changes their bodies and their kind of, the kind of hormones within their bodies. And it needs, and we've also found out that if fathers spend solo time with their kids, it's really important. So I guess family time is great, but dads need to be on their own doing those mundane tasks, on a regular basis for that to shift and the relationship to improve.
Yeah. And coming back to this choice of mothers of reducing their working time, in our survey we saw that the first reason to change that, it was to spend more time with their children, because they know it's important for the children to be with them, but also cited like financial constraints or work-related issues. So, I mean, every woman is different, every mother is different. And what we advocate at MMM is that every woman should have the choice, because we know that some women want to continue working because they like their careers and because it's very hard to stay at home with a baby alone. But that others, they really want to be there and to really enjoy this time with their babies. And what do you think? Well, you already mentioned, Clémentine, what are the solutions for that? I mean, at MMM, we think that the working environments should change, and specifically for parents and caregivers, with a focus on mothers, to offer flexible working options. That is really important. Are there any other solutions that you think about around work?
I think I'm not going to be specific, but I think what has to change is little boys growing up knowing if one day they want to be a father, they will have to stop working at one point. Same with the mom, with the women. So us as women, know from the beginning that if we want a kid, at one point we'll be stop working for 3 months or 4 or 6, whatever. But we know that we have that integrated, not men. And today we are asking our husbands to do that. And they're like, whoa, this is too much for me, because they haven't been prepared for that. We can't do much for our generation, I think, because they've been raised that way, but we can do a lot more for those coming up. And if the change comes from kids, then it will change society, because who makes decision today? Men who are older, not us. And if young kids have seen their father take paternity leave, or have heard their parents talk about, oh, I've stopped working for you because that was important, then they will grow up thinking that's normal and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to work toward that goal. So that's why I was saying we need policies change, because we need cultural change about that. Right now, what we're doing inside companies is great, but it's hard because we feel alone. And if at school, for example, we teach young boys that they will be father maybe one day if they want to, and that's how it's going to be affecting their career, maybe in a good way, but they will stop the same way they do for women. And I think that's going to be a major change. But we are also seeing so many country going in another direction right now. That's a little scary, I'm not going to lie, because I feel like we're part of the world trying to shift into equity and equality, and have more, try to close the gender gap. And we see across the ocean, that's not what's happening. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just thinking education is the key right here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm also concerned about what's happening on the other side of the Atlantic. But I wonder what women and mothers in that country are thinking, because who is doing that laws? Who is deciding all this? Those are not mothers. That I think I'm pretty sure. Okay, thank you very much. We're gonna go on to the second section that, I mean, we already talked a little bit about the family dynamics because everything is linked, but we're gonna ask the audience a new question, okay? This is a question. What percentage of fathers took no paternity leave, even if they were entitled to it? So you have 3 options. Was it 22%? Was it 41%? Or was it 35%? Please pick your option. Thank you very much. We're gonna close this window. And as soon as we are ready, we will share the results of what you think fathers did. So we're half, 41, 35, we don't know. Okay, we're gonna reveal the right answer to this. And it was 35% of fathers who took no, I repeat it, no paternity leave. Great, thank you. Second question on this section on family dynamics. Who do you think are the main providers of after-school childcare for school-age children? So after school, who's gonna taking care of those children? Do you think it's first grandparents, then the mother, then the father? Or is it first the mother, then the father, then grandparents? Or is it mother, grandparents, and then father? There is one correct answer. You have a few more seconds to pick what you think is the correct one. Okay, we're gonna close this window and reveal what you think. So here is a large majority, pretty sure about this being mother, grandparents, and father. And the correct answer that we're going to reveal in the next slide is indeed first mothers, then grandparents and other family members, and last fathers or co-parent or partner. Thank you. So we have these two data. So on one hand, that 35% of fathers took no paternity leave, even if they were entitled to it, because in Europe, fathers do have a paternity leave. And these are the main providers of after-school childcare. And mothers, even if they are working, they're still the first childcare providers. Nikki, what's going on? Where are the fathers? Is it acceptable in 2024?
It's not acceptable. I'm not entirely surprised in that there are so many factors which prevent fathers taking that time that we've started to talk about already. I mean, I think the statistics are quite interesting globally. I think there's only, the World Policy Center said something like there was only 24% of countries that have shared parental leave at least 80% of salary. So if you have leave and you're both trying to take it and you're both having reduced salaries, it just becomes completely impossible. So finance is one. The expectation that it's always going to be the mum is another. The fact, I think Alain really put his finger on the spot there as well, in that when the Scandinavian countries changed to say, right, dads, if you don't take this leave, you lose it, the number of dads taking leave shot up. Whereas if it's shared, I as a mum wouldn't want to give my leave away. But if it's additional leave for the dad, then that makes a huge difference. So in the UK, we have an incredibly complicated system. The structure of how parental leave is agreed in terms of policy, it makes an incredible difference. And I think that would then support more fathers. If they don't take it, they lose it, then there isn't really an argument about it, really. So I think there are lots of things that can be done to encourage more dads, but we also need, as Clémentine was saying earlier, to educate boys from much earlier on to say, this is your duty too. And there's lots of interesting examples that I can give later on.
Yeah, well, at MMM, I mean, we also think that there should be a mandatory parental leave, at least for, let's say, 1 month. Because as I was saying in another webinar, for me, everything starts where? From the beginning, right? From the moment you arrive home with your baby and all this new life starts taking shape. And of course, if fathers can again go back to work, like kind of escaping, because that was also one of my questions, maybe for you, Clémentine, are men escaping like the home? You can answer that. We can't hear you.
I think Dr. Alain Grégoire might answer that one. Wait, can I add something though? Then he can talk, because I also had father tell me that they couldn't take it because the pressure of the company, even though they were entitled to. So there's a real reality of men wanting to be providers and also be present for their kids, and having the pressure of the work environment. And that's a big problem. And we should also find companies that do that to fathers, because this is very damageable for them and the mother, obviously. And Alain can go on for men escaping the family life.
No, well, I'm really sorry, but my gender has a whole load of problems, and yeah, they might say, oh well, it's all their own mother's faults, of course, but that is not a sufficient answer. And yeah, it is true. There's lots of stuff in the chat about men are different to women, and yes, there's lots of evidence that men are different in terms of their both their social development, but also some genetic factors, almost certainly, and gender factors. But most of it is culturally based and developmentally based, and it's important to acknowledge that men can do mothering tasks, even if they do them slightly differently, and men can change and become joyful in the experience as well as suffer the traumas and difficulties and challenges of it. So we're not so different that we have an excuse that we can stay in the pub all the time while mother is doing all the work, or stay at work. And who makes the decisions about what happens in the workplace? Well, most of the senior executives throughout the world in the workplaces who make the decisions about these sorts of things are men. I still think there is no solution for rapid change apart from legislating and forcing men to take time out. And there may be some relationship situations where men are really not very desirable in the home and are doing harm, but that is a separate problem that needs dealing with separately, and maybe less of a problem if they have to be more involved in childcare. So, there are all sorts of cycles going on here. I think just to move away from dads slightly, because I don't think anybody has all the answers. We just need more dads. But I think we also need, the village story. And you have some response to questions about who else was involved. And there's huge variability in the other people who play a role. The grandparents varies a lot from country to country and presumably culture to culture, grandparents and other family members. But where are the friends? Where is the rest of society? And they're almost invisible. So that village is simply, society is not supporting the parents of preschool children and babies to do the most difficult thing any of us ever does in this world. And I think we somehow need to create a shift in the culture where everybody plays a role and understands that they have a role to play in nurturing parents and supporting parents and supporting them with doing some of the work of nurturing their babies and their young children. And there's not enough of that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Alain. Sorry, go ahead, Nikki.
I just add something underpinning all that. I mean, I really think we have a problem in our societies in not valuing care. And I think until we value care as much as we valued paid work, nothing's going to change. That really underpins everything. Paid care workers are paid badly. All the care, the most important job, I agree with you, Anna. I mean, what is more important than bringing up the next generation? And yet we don't value it in any way, financially, emotionally, socially. And it's really shocking to see some of the statistics that are coming out, which just show that to me so clearly. I'm so impressed, by the way, with all the chat, that you're all so knowledgeable, and some really interesting links I'm noting down frantically. So thank you.
Yeah, I really agree with what you're saying. In the options that were respondents in the survey had, there were also friends, but as you say, Alain, that was very little. It was very little. And as you say, mothers and parents, we feel very much alone in what we have to do. And sometimes even in the workplace, for example, it's kind of like you have to hide that you're a parent. Like, because if you say you're a mother, especially for mothers, it's like if you're not engaged enough, so you have to hide it. And it really doesn't help. I mean, it should be possible and acceptable, and we should admire people who are parents, because as you say, it's so tough, it's so important. We have such a big responsibility. And also, I wanted to say about the Swedish, that in our survey also, when we asked, how long of the paternity leave did the father took? In Sweden, there is like, I think the highest rate of fathers taking less than what we are entitled to. Less. So yeah, we may think that, yeah, they're so happy to have this very long paternity leave, but actually, yeah, they're not taking advantage of it.
But they're taking less because they have so much time, or are they not taking it at all? Because there is a difference. Maybe if they have 6 months and they only take 3 months, it's way more than what father do in France anyway. So it's
Yeah.
still more. So see, like, because I know they have a long periods where they can take.
Yeah. Well, what I can tell you is the reason fathers give for not taking or taking less than the paternity leave, but at European level, I cannot tell you right now for the Swedish, but it's like a workload and work pressure at work. That's the main reason. Those are the main reasons. Yeah.
There's a joke in Scandinavia that the fathers love to take paternity leave, particularly in the hunting and fishing seasons. I don't know how much it reflects reality. I'm not committing myself, but
Probably more than half. I always say that a joke is half joke, half reality. So
it's
yeah.
funnier that way.
I think those jokes are difficult though, because they reinforce that idea that men are not going to be very good at caring. As somebody's saying in the chat here, you know, I don't think there are that many men here. I know a lot of men who are really, really engaged in this work, and they're lobbying their politicians, they're fighting for parental leave within their own companies, they're talking to other men about it. So the men are out there, but they're still a minority, and that has to change.
Yeah, indeed.
And I had something, my podcast has millions of downloads and I have 30% of men listening.
Oh, really?
Which is a great stat, but
Yeah.
it's not 50, but 30%, I think it's a great, I think it gives me hope that maybe our generation are trying to change a narrative about education and how father are implied into their children's future. But
Yeah. Well, it's a good number. I wouldn't have said that. I would have
I
said
know.
10% or something like that.
But they're not on social media for sure, but they do listen to podcasts because their wives send them to them.
We have a radio show in the UK called Woman's Hour, and men are 40% of the listening audience.
See?
Wow.
So the audio works for men. That's what we have to.
Well, because it stays like a hidden, you know, it's not public. So
Yes. Mhm.
okay, thank you very much. We're going to go to the third section of the webinar we're going to go with mental health. Okay, dear audience, this is the fifth question for you. What percentage of mothers reported experiencing at least one mental health issue, such as depression, anxiety, burnout, peripartum depression? So you have three options. Was it 40%? Was it half of them, or 60%? Please select your answer. We're going to close this window in a few seconds, and then we'll reveal what you think about the mental health suffering of the 9,600 mothers from our survey. Okay, we're going to close it. You've had, I think, enough time. Okay, so you think it's 60%, most of you, 60%. Well, thank you. And the right answer to this is the next slide, 50%. So half of them. Among them, and among mothers with children of less than 1 year, 17% suffered from peripartum depression. That will go for Alain later. And also, I would like to share with you that in our survey, we asked women if they felt overloaded, and the positive answer to this was 67%. So 67% of women feel overloaded. The charge mentale, as we say in French. Okay, we're going to go to the last question. What do you think are the 3 top countries where mothers report feeling the most recognized? Okay, so you will have the list of the 12 European countries. Please choose 3, the 3 you think where mothers report feeling the most recognized. Okay, Belgium, Czechia, France, Germany, Ireland. I'll give you a few more seconds, knowing that not all the European countries are there, but from our survey, the 12 European countries where we surveyed mothers. Okay, thank you very much. We're gonna close this window, and as soon as we are ready, we will reveal the results. Okay, it's interesting. So, not surprisingly, 85% of you thought it was Sweden, first one. Second one, it's Germany, no, Belgium. And in the third place comes Germany. So you thought it was Sweden, Belgium, and Germany. This is going to be very interesting. And now we will see a graph where you see the whole list of countries. In the first place, not surprisingly, goes Sweden, like very much higher than the other countries. Then there is UK, and then there is Czechia. And Belgium and Germany are below the mean. Below the mean. And so for the next slide, so that we wrap up with the 2 last data, we have that 50% of mothers reported experiencing at least one mental health issue, and how mothers feel recognized, knowing that Sweden is the first one. Well, Italy is less than half from the Swedish mothers. Alain, what are your thoughts on these numbers?
Well, unfortunately, tragically, I'm not surprised at all to see these figures emerging. They are what all the international research in every part of the world is showing very clearly, that this is a challenging time for human beings physically, parenting young children, but not at all surprisingly, because it makes more demands on our minds than anything else we do. It affects our mental well-being. And in a way, I see it as a good thing that women are at least able to answer questions. They may not be necessarily shouting out loud about it, although I think increasingly they are. But at least they are able to respond. And I think it probably reflects the true level of suffering that's out there. There probably are around 50% of mums, of mothers in pregnancy, women in pregnancy and postnatally, who are not suffering with their mental well-being, but certainly 1 in 2 are. And at least they're able to acknowledge that, to recognize that. That is a good thing in a way. But the majority, according to the research that we have and your findings, are not finding that that is recognized by others, and certainly not by professionals. And when you think that we now have a situation across the entire world, including in less wealthy countries than we find in Europe, that we have maternity services, healthcare services that are in contact with women, even in low and middle income countries, and yet almost exclusively, even in wealthy countries, those services just care for the women's physical health. That is a truly shocking situation because mental health problems are more common than physical health problems. They cause more deaths in mothers having babies throughout the world than physical health, than any individual physical health care problem, which is really extraordinary. Not many people realize this. And these are some of the most serious health problems that we see that lead to hospitalizations of women and serious disability. And if we just take the example of just depression on its own, this is the most burdensome condition we know in human beings, health condition we know of in human beings, in women of childbearing age. So these are serious disabling problems, and our systems of healthcare are not supporting women with them or recognizing women, even though they're in contact with them. And that has to change, particularly in Europe, where we have a supposedly enlightened liberal societies, and where women themselves, we can't blame women anymore. We can't say, oh, they don't realize that they're not, that they're having a difficult time. They do. And they are asking for help and they are not getting it. And that's not good enough. Incidentally, we talked about fathers earlier on. Fathers also suffer with their mental health, but not quite as much in terms of statistics, in terms of numbers, and not quite as severely in terms of the very severe, very dangerous mental health conditions. So action absolutely is needed. And there is no country I can point to where the level of action matches the scientific knowledge that we have about both what is needed and what can be done, because we know what can be done, but we're not doing it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And something, I mean, I don't want to point anyone or any country, but in our data, so Swedish mothers are the ones that feel the most recognized, but it's in Sweden where the rate of depression is the highest. So as you say, the psychological problems and challenges are not addressed, and those are the most important ones. I would like to address a question to Clémentine. Well, you have something to say, right?
Just about Sweden and Swedish mother saying they are depressed. Maybe that's also a good sign because they have space in Sweden to say it out loud. And it may be, I don't know about it, but maybe their care providers are listening and counting the right way. Because in France, we know suicide is the first leading death of women or mother in the first year after having a baby. It's crazy. Like we have so much money to put into anything, but we know women are dying, mothers are dying from suicide because they're not taken care properly in France. So maybe to think about that stat about Swedish women, maybe they're listened to. That's why their numbers are high. And maybe in France, our numbers are way too high anyway, but maybe because half of the women don't even know they're depressed or they're suffering from that, you know? So I don't know, I'm just thinking about maybe sometimes having a higher rate is maybe a good sign that we can talk freely about mental health.
Yeah, or that women can recognize that they are feeling depressed. They give, like, they open the door to that feeling, to that sensations. And what do you think? I mean, how do you think mothers feel recognized? Because this is a very open question, right? And how do you feel?
Well, if you look at the stats, us in France, we're below the mean. So we don't feel that recognition that we so deeply crave, because that is so important that women and mothers are being recognized in this crazy time of busyness for us. And being a mother is no joke. Being a father is no joke for sure. But I think it goes through the work environment. We need to be recognized inside the work environment. We need to be valued. Like, yes, you just gave birth. Maybe you'll take time, but you'll come back. And this, your career is not ending right now, and it's going to be amazing. Or maybe you don't want to go back and you want to be with your kids, and it's fine. You're working in another area. It's fine. So I think that's the first thing. And then I'm speaking in my name, but I think we need more recognition from fathers, because that unpaid labor, unseen labor inside our home, or maybe sometimes taken as something very normal, although it's not. And divorce rate are up. Baby clash is a huge problem in the first years of after having a baby, because also our generation is like, I want a career, I want to be a good mother, and you need to step up. And you stepping up means you have to let go of stuff. And we know men have had those privilege for so many centuries. It's hard to let go of privilege. I am sure it is. As a white person, I can say it too. It's hard. But if we don't do that, then we are leaving behind like half of the population. This is crazy to me. But I think work is where we need recognition, and with fathers and family.
Yeah.
And if we do that, then maybe the healthcare system will change. But as you said, Alain, your profession is not there yet. So I think that's the third aspect. We need recognition from the healthcare providers. We need them to listen, especially men.
Yeah. Well, in my case, as a working mother and mother of two, I see what you're saying, Clémentine. For me, the feeling would be frustration, and well, frustration leads to maybe mental overload, and yeah, and in our survey we saw also, we asked women what was the help that, I mean, the thing that helped them the most, and what came up was taking time for themselves. Okay. And the second, the help from family, and that two were more than, for example, exercise or medication or private therapists. Nikki, how do you think can mothers take time for themselves? Like you as a mother and with your
I mean,
experience.
so many interesting points coming up, both from Clémentine and Alain, and from the panel. I mean, I think I'm going back to this business of unpaid care not being recognised, I guess. I mean, the skills that you learn as a parent are amazing. I said juggling as one of my 3 words. There are so many skills as a parent that are really useful at work, so many skills at work that are useful as a parent, but we just don't recognize it as a skilled thing to do. And therefore that's why, it's a kind of vicious cycle, in a sense. It's a woman's job and therefore it's not skilled. It's not skilled and therefore it's a woman's job, and that has to change. And I think this the kind of mental health issues are, well, they're broader than just mothers and fathers. Obviously, we could get into a much wider discussion around that, but they are linked to the lack of support. I mean, you've got some really interesting questions when people read your report around childcare, for example, and the costs of childcare, around who's around to support you, around the community, as Alain was saying. So there are so many other things that we require as people to give us good mental health. And if you're a mother or a father on top of that, you need more. And actually, society gives us less. So we kind of got it completely the wrong way around, it seems to me. And I think that's one of the things that your survey is really showing very, very clearly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is a very, very interesting conversation that I would like to keep on going for still an hour. But as we have a few more minutes until the end of the webinar, I would like to end with a question to each of you. For Alain, concerning mental health, looking at the numbers, what are your recommendations to improve the mental health of mothers?
We need a holistic, multi-pronged approach. So I'm afraid there isn't a simple one single answer to this. We need to talk more about mental health, and Make Mothers Matter is doing a fantastic job in highlighting this issue, bringing it to the fore. We need to reduce the stigma and the discrimination against mental health, and that is fantastically illustrated by the fact that maternity services just do physical health care, and the rest are mental health, which is what we rely on to be good parents and give the world a wonderful, thriving next generation, is completely ignored by the health system. I'm being a bit excessive in saying completely, because individual practitioners, midwives, obstetricians, and others actually want and understand mental health, but the systems and governments and politicians are not taking this seriously, and they really need to. So we need to send a signal out that this is important. We need to nurture parents. All societies rely on parents to do the work of society, to do most of the work. That will never change. But we need to send a signal out to the rest of society that these people are incredibly valuable to all of us, and we need to support them at individual levels, but also at social levels, which means spending money on parents of young children, on young families, through systems, through support structures. We need places for families to go to when they're struggling. We need people for families to go to. Human beings do best in terms of their mental well-being when they're supported. We can survive the most incredible traumas and difficulties in our lives when we're not on our own. Parents feel on their own, particularly at the beginning of parenting, and that we've got to change that. So there's lots of things we have to change. And low down on the list, I would put the sort of work that I've spent my life doing, which is individual work with individual people who have mental health difficulties. That will never solve the big problem, but of course it can help individuals, and we need to make that more available as well. So just as with heart problems, if you're serious about reducing mortality and morbidity from cardiac problems, you don't just produce more cardiologists. You actually change people's diets, their lifestyles, you change the laws about smoking, about fatty foods and processed, heavily processed foods, but you also provide a good health system. And this is what we need to do, particularly in the perinatal period for parents of very young children. And then we will have a much happier, more productive, more well-functioning society, and we won't have Trump voters, and we won't have the challenges of autocracies and men messing up the whole of society, because they will be loving, nurturing sorts of people. And I'm not exaggerating. These people who behave in these ways are traumatized in their early lives. I'll stop there before I get completely carried away.
Thank you, Alain. I think we have time for one last question, maybe for you both, Nikki and Clémentine. There is a current global backlash against women's rights, and there are tensions between men and women. The United Nations Secretary General calls it the poison of patriarchy, and refers to the women's rights as currently under siege. What does this mean for a woman's mental health and sharing the care when 28% of Gen Z men think staying at home to care for children makes a man less of a man?
Yeah, I'll pick up that quickly. I think it's 19% of Gen Z women, isn't it? So it's not just the men that think that. We're needing to change mindsets across the board. And I think there was a question in the quick Q&A about, trad wives and going back, yes. The kind of whole backlash is really scary for any of us who work on gender equality. And I think solidarity is the answer, that we need to get together, we need to have communities, we need to find ways of pushing back against this, of valuing care and of including men and women both in caring for children and the elderly and people with disabilities, and caring for their mental health and caring for their physical health. It needs to be something we all do together.
Yeah, indeed, together. Do you want to add something, Clémentine?
Yeah, I think we had the same issue back in June in France when our president overturned the deputy chamber and everything. And so we had a big discussion about racism, far right. And I think it goes the same way as what we are seeing about the backlash between women and their rights. I think we need to listen to those people. Why are they thinking like this? Because if we spend our time overlooking them, telling them they suck or they're idiots, or what are we creating? We're creating people who think again and again that we are above them. And that's exactly what they're trying to tell us, that they don't feel recognized. That's what we're saying again. And how come can we in 2025 have younger generation go backwards? How come? What happened? So I think we really missed something about listening. And also, I'm talking from my experience in France. Here in France, 80% of people think correcting physically a child is educating. And I so agree with you, Alain. Those kids are traumatized and now they lack confidence, so they want power. So they're forcing their views on people. And first, we need to change education. Again, it goes back to that. And we need to tell people, no, hitting your kid is not going to make them better humans. It's the opposite. But we haven't done that for sure in France. We haven't. And to me, it goes back to that. And they're suffering. So what we need to do is listen, even though we disagree deeply. We need them to go to therapy for sure, which won't happen. I know that, but I think it's very difficult and frustrating, and as you said, Nikki, very scary, because you won't make anyone change unless they want to do it. So
Yeah,
it's
indeed.
a big question. But also, I want to give hope. I was reading something very interesting saying that when we are pushing boundaries and limits, people do feel uncomfortable and they want to fight back. And that's what's happening right now. People are fighting back. And that's a good sign of maybe something changing for the better. I'm trying to see hope in that.
Yeah,
But
we see a reaction to what's
yes, a
happening.
strong reaction means,
Yeah.
okay, they feel like they're threatened by something, so maybe we're changing the narrative. And right now it feels a little funky because we're in the middle zone.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see it that way, but I'm hopeful because I have 3 daughters and I don't want them to grow up in a world that is less safe than what I grew up in, but we'll
Yeah.
see.
Thank you, Clémentine. So yeah, what I hear is that we need to listen, that we need solidarity, that we need empathy, that we need the community. I think those are very feminine attributes, I would say. Well, thank you. Thank you really so much for being with us today. On behalf of Make Mothers Matter, I really want to extend our sincere thanks for your participation in this webinar. Thanks to you, the public, for your engagement. Thanks to our panelists, marvelous panelists, Nikki, Alain, and Clémentine, for your insightful contributions we've heard through the session. Really, we're standing in front of some alarming figures. So 50% of mothers suffering from mental health issues, 67% reporting feeling overloaded. And where is this coming from? Well, as you said, Alain, is a mix of everything: a lack of workplace support, insufficient policies, the need for stronger co-parenting support, and this can't be overlooked any longer. So what are we going to do about it? Well, here's the good news. This conversation is just the beginning, and we'll continue our journey through Europe. We're going to travel across the 12 European countries where the 9,600 mothers have shared their voices with us. We are committed to making sure their messages reach the high-level decision makers who need to take action, and we will be doing it at national and European level. We're going to bring them solutions and recommendations. At MMM, we're working for you, you mothers, women among our audience, for your rights, and we need your help to make that impact. So please follow us, share our work, and sign the petition we just created on change.org to end the maternal mental health crisis in Europe, as Alain said, because there is pressure on mothers like never before, because we need to break the silence around this issue, because we need to guarantee universal access to maternal mental health services in every country. And we need thousands of voices to drive leaders to act. The link is in the chat, so please take a moment to vote. Also, just a quick reminder, all registrants will receive a copy of the survey reports, and the recording of today's session will be available soon for you to review and share. Thank you again for your time today. Let's stay connected, keep advocating, and continue this important work together. Thank you so much. Thank you. And see you soon.
Thank you, MMM.
Thank you, Alain.
MMN.
Thank you.
Thank you.